Walk into any supermarket, pharmacy, or even a corner gas station, and the first thing you notice is the sheer volume of products promising health. Shelves overflow with protein bars stamped with bold slogans, brightly colored vitamin waters claiming to boost immunity, cereals with heart logos and assurances that they will lower cholesterol. From low-fat yogurts to gluten-free cookies, everything insists that it is part of a lifestyle of wellness. But what if this obsession with wellness is not really about making us healthier? What if it is about keeping us dependent on a system that profits most when we stay trapped between sickness and the promise of recovery? And before we go any further, if you want to hear more about hidden histories and modern conspiracies just like this one, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Most people who watch still aren't subscribed, and by hitting that button, you'll make sure you don't miss the next investigation. For decades, two powerful industries have grown side by side. Big Food has filled our plates with ultra-processed meals, refined sugars, and chemical additives. Big Pharma has offered pills, injections, and lifelong treatments for the very conditions those foods help create. They don't need to collude in smoke-filled backrooms. Their incentives naturally align. One industry makes money when we consume addictive, unhealthy products. The other makes money when we get sick and require long-term management. Together, they form a cycle where human suffering is not an accident, but a predictable, profitable outcome. This is not speculation. History shows us how the pattern was set. In 1967, the Sugar Research Foundation secretly paid Harvard scientists to publish research that downplayed sugar's role in heart disease and shifted the blame onto dietary fat. The manipulated findings shaped U.S. dietary guidelines for decades. As fat was demonized, food companies churned out low-fat but sugar-loaded products. At the same time, pharmaceutical companies made billions selling cholesterol-lowering statins, blood pressure medication, and later, drugs for type 2 diabetes. It was a perfect loop. Create confusion about nutrition, sell products that damage health, then profit from the treatments. That is where our story begins. The roots of this cycle stretch back to the mid-20th century, in the years after World War II, when America embraced mass production, convenience, and the promise of modern science. After the war, factories that had once produced rations and military supplies were repurposed to feed a booming civilian market. The 1950s saw the rise of convenience foods, frozen dinners, boxed cereals, canned soups. In 1954, Swanson introduced the first TV dinner, turkey, cornbread, and peas, served in an aluminum tray that went straight into the oven. Within a decade, Americans were buying tens of millions of them each year. The modern food system was being built, and convenience was marketed as progress. But this convenience came at a cost. Nutrition was sacrificed for shelf life, taste was engineered with sugar and fat, and addictive additives became standard. Sugar consumption in the United States skyrocketed in the second half of the century. By the 1970s, Americans were consuming more than twice as much sugar per capita as in the early 1900s. The consequences followed quickly. Obesity rates began to climb, type 2 diabetes became more common, and heart disease emerged as the country's #1 killer. At the same time, the pharmaceutical industry was experiencing its own golden age. Antibiotics, steroids, tranquilizers, and psychiatric medications filled medicine cabinets. By the 1960s, Americans were taking more pills than ever before, and new drugs were constantly arriving on the market. Instead of asking why so many people were falling ill in the first place, the culture leaned on pharmaceuticals to treat the symptoms. Heartburn? Take an antacid. High blood pressure? A pill a day? Cholesterol rising? Another prescription. It was easier to treat illness than to prevent it. The 1977 U.S. dietary guidelines cemented this approach. Shaped by lobbying from the food industry, the guidelines told Americans to cut back on fats while giving sugar a free pass. Low-fat processed foods exploded onto the shelves. Margarine was marketed as healthier than butter. Breakfast cereals were fortified with synthetic vitamins and sold as the perfect start to the day, even when they were more than 40% sugar. And diet sodas promised a guilt-free indulgence while hooking consumers on artificial sweeteners. Decades later, internal documents revealed the truth. The sugar industry had orchestrated the narrative. Harvard researchers had been paid to protect sugar's reputation, shifting the blame to fat. This deception distorted public health policy, shaped how millions of families ate, and created a multi-billion-dollar opportunity for the pharmaceutical industry to treat the resulting illnesses. By the late 1970s, the foundation of the modern cycle was firmly in place. Big Food had discovered how to maximize profits by producing cheap, addictive, and seemingly healthy products. Big Pharma had discovered how to maximize profits by selling medications that managed but rarely cured the resulting diseases. And ordinary people were caught in the middle, told they were making healthy choices while slowly being locked into a lifetime of dependence. By the late 1970s and early 1980s, the cracks in the system were becoming hard to ignore. Obesity rates were climbing, heart disease was the leading cause of death, and Americans were beginning to ask questions about the foods filling their kitchens. Yet instead of reforming their products to make them genuinely healthier, food corporations found a much more profitable solution: rebranding. The 1980s became the decade of diet culture. Low fat was the golden phrase, and consumers were trained to equate fat with danger. Corporations rushed to meet the trend. Cookies, frozen dinners, yogurts, and snack bars were stripped of fat, but often loaded with sugar and chemical fillers to preserve taste. Snackwell's, a brand launched in the early 1990s, became a household name by promising guilt-free indulgence. Millions of Americans devoured its fat-free cookies, believing they were making better choices, while obesity and diabetes rates continued to climb. Beverage companies seized the opportunity too. PepsiCo, long associated with sugary sodas, reinvented itself through healthier drinks like Diet Pepsi and sports beverages like Gatorade. Gatorade, marketed as scientifically designed to replace electrolytes, was in reality little more than flavored sugar water with a health halo. By the 1990s, diet sodas accounted for nearly a quarter of all soft drink sales. Consumers believed they were cutting calories and protecting their health. But later studies suggested that artificial sweeteners could alter metabolism, intensify sugar cravings, and even worsen weight gain. This era also saw the rise of functional foods, products fortified with synthetic vitamins or minerals. Breakfast cereals advertised themselves as complete sources of nutrition, despite being primarily sugar and starch. Margarine was promoted as heart-healthy compared to butter, despite containing hydrogenated oils later shown to increase cardiovascular risk. The trick was always the same: slap on a health claim, ride the wave of the latest diet trend, and keep consumers hooked. Meanwhile, another industry was exploding in the shadows. Supplements, multivitamins, herbal remedies, protein powders, and later probiotics became staples of the so-called wellness movement. Americans wary of processed food but still searching for easy fixes turned to pills and powders that promised to fill the nutritional gap. By the late 1980s, the supplement market was worth billions. A pivotal moment came in 1994 with the passage of the Dietary Supplement Health and Education Act, or DSAEA. The law dramatically loosened regulations on supplements, exempting them from the rigorous testing required for pharmaceuticals. From that point on, companies could sell pills and powders without proving they were effective or even safe. The only limitation was that they could not explicitly claim to cure diseases. But they were free to imply almost anything else. Words like supports immunity, boosts energy, or aids heart health became the marketing norm. The industry exploded. Americans spent billions on supplements that were often poorly tested, mislabeled, or completely ineffective. A 2015 investigation by the New York State Attorney General found that major retailers like Walmart, Target, and GNSD were selling supplements that contained little to none of the advertised ingredients. Some were filled with cheap fillers like rice, wheat, or even houseplants. Others contained undisclosed substances that posed real health risks. Yet the market kept growing, reaching more than $30 billion annually in the US alone. What most consumers didn't realize was who controlled this industry. Supplements were marketed as natural, independent alternatives to pharmaceuticals. But in reality, they were often owned, distributed, or later acquired by the very same corporations dominating Big Food and Big Pharma. Pfizer owned Centrum for decades. Nestle acquired Garden of Life and Pure Encapsulations in the 2010s. Even Clorox, best known for bleach, owns Nutranext, a supplement manufacturer. Wellness wasn't a rebellion against the system, it was the system itself, dressed in green packaging. The 2000s and 2010s only amplified the cycle. The rise of the internet and later social media created a new era of wellness marketing. Influencers became the faces of detox teas, collagen powders, and vitamin gummies. They projected aspirational lifestyles. Glowing skin, toned bodies, endless energy. And attributed it all to products they were paid to promote. Instagram became a global marketplace for wellness, with corporations hiding behind seemingly grassroots branding, but the underlying products had changed little. They were still processed, still profit-driven, and still controlled by the same handful of multinational corporations. The language evolved. Low-fat gave way to low-carb, and shafki, keto-friendly, plant-based, or gluten-free. Each new buzzword generated another wave of products, another surge of profits, and another illusion of choice. Consumers cycled endlessly through diets and supplements, believing they were pursuing health, while industries quietly reaped the rewards. By the 2010s, the global wellness industry was valued at more than $4 trillion. What had once been a personal pursuit of balance and health had been transformed into one of the most profitable markets on Earth. And yet, despite billions spent on diet foods, supplements, and fitness programs, chronic disease rates continued to rise. People were buying wellness in record numbers, but actual wellness remained elusive. The rebrand was complete. Food companies no longer sold just junk food, they sold healthy junk food. Pharmaceutical companies no longer sold just prescription drugs, they sold vitamins and supplements too. And consumers, desperate for answers in a confusing marketplace, kept buying, hoping the next product would finally deliver the health they were promised. By the end of the 20th century, wellness was no longer about prevention or lifestyle. It had become a market, the one designed, owned, and operated by the same corporations selling the very products we were told to avoid. The cycle deepened, unhealthy diets created health problems, pharmaceuticals managed the consequences, and wellness products filled the gap in between, all through three streams flowing into the same corporate machine. To truly understand how big food and big pharma carved up the modern wellness market, you have to follow the money. The story isn't just about what's on the shelf, it's about who owns it, who profits, and how a handful of corporations came to dominate nearly every aisle in the supermarket and the pharmacy. Consider this, just 10 corporations control most of the global packaged food supply. In addition, Nestlé, PepsiCo, Coca-Cola, Unilever, Mondelez, Danone, General Mills, Kellogg's, Mars, and Associated British Foods. Between them, they own hundreds of brands spanning candy, cereal, frozen dinners, bottled water, and even organic snacks. Meanwhile, the pharmaceutical world is similarly concentrated. A few giants, Pfizer, Bayer, Johnson & Johnson, Novartis, and Merck, control the majority of the global drug market. Together, these conglomerates shape what people eat, what people take for their ailments, and even how people define health itself. And increasingly, their interests overlap. In 2012, Nestlé made headlines by purchasing Pfizer's infant nutrition business for nearly $12 billion. Overnight, the company most famous for chocolate bars and instant coffee became one of the largest players in the baby formula industry. Parents buying Nestlé-branded formula believed they were choosing a trusted health product, without realizing that behind the label stood the same corporation selling candy and processed snacks. Bayer, best known for its pharmaceutical division, followed a similar path. In 2014, it bought Merck's consumer health division for more than $14 billion. With the deal, Bayer gained control of Claritin, Coppertone, and even the popular Flintstones vitamins. Here was a company that manufactured prescription cancer drugs, also selling chewable supplements to children. The lines between medicine, wellness, and consumer goods blurred completely. Nestlé, again, pushed deeper into supplements. In 2017, it acquired Garden of Life, a brand marketed as clean and organic, and Pure Encapsulations, known for professional-grade supplements sold through doctors. In 2020, it bought Vital Proteins, a collagen powder brand that dominated Instagram feeds. Consumers saw these products as part of a grassroots wellness movement. In reality, they were owned by the largest food corporation on the planet. And Nestlé is not alone. Once a supplement or wellness brand gains traction, it becomes a target for acquisition. Burt's Bees, once a quirky natural brand, was bought by Clorox in 2007. Seventh Generation, an eco-friendly cleaning and personal care brand, was acquired by Unilever in 2016. What appears to be independent, alternative, or natural almost always ends up absorbed into the corporate web. Even within pharmaceuticals, the crossover is striking. Pfizer controlled Centrum Vitamins for decades before spinning off its consumer health division into a joint venture with GlaxoSmithKline in 2019. That partnership created the largest over-the-counter healthcare business in the world, combining painkillers, vitamins, and wellness products under one roof. For consumers, it meant that the same corporations producing high-priced prescription drugs were also selling the vitamins on their kitchen counter. Why this rush into wellness? The answer is simple: profit. The global supplement market alone surpassed $150 billion by 2021, with projections only climbing. Unlike prescription drugs, supplements face little regulation. They can be sold directly to consumers with vague health claims. They don't require expensive clinical trials. And once brand trust is established, profit margins are enormous. For corporations, wellness products are the perfect complement to pharmaceuticals: low risk, high return, and highly marketable. But following the money is not always straightforward. Ownership is often obscured through layers of subsidiaries, holding companies, and private equity investments. A protein powder may look like a small startup on the shelf, but behind it could be Nestlé, PepsiCo, or Bayer. By design, it's nearly impossible for the average consumer to trace where their money actually goes. This corporate concentration is not just about profits, it also shapes research, regulation, and public perception. When large food corporations also own wellness brands, they control both the problem and the supposed solution. When pharmaceutical companies also sell supplements, they profit whether consumers choose pills or powders. And because these conglomerates wield enormous lobbying power, they influence public health guidelines, bite regulations that threaten profits, and sponsor scientific studies that align with their interests. For example, Coca-Cola has funded research that minimizes the role of sugary drinks in obesity, instead shifting the focus to lack of exercise. Soda companies have spent millions fighting sugar taxes across the world, and pharmaceutical corporations have lobbied aggressively to extend patents, block generic drugs, and maintain high prices. When wellness, food, and pharma converge, the system becomes less about health and more about control. The irony is hard to ignore. The same corporations responsible for fueling chronic illness through processed foods now sell the supplements and vitamins marketed as the antidote. The same pharmaceutical giants profiting from disease management also profit from wellness products meant to prevent it. In every direction, the money flows upward into the same hands. What looks like choice is, in reality, an illusion. Consumers believe they are navigating a diverse marketplace filled with independent options. In truth, most paths lead back to the same corporate giants. Wellness isn't an alternative to big food and big pharma. Wellness has become big food and big pharma. By tracing the mergers, acquisitions, and hidden ownership structures, the conspiracy becomes clear. Wellness is not about independence, empowerment, or personal health. It is about expansion. It is about consolidation. And ultimately, it is about profit. While corporations were consolidating their power, ordinary people were paying the price. The numbers tell the story. In 1960, about 13% of American adults were classified as obese. By 2020, that figure had soared past 40%. Today, over 37 million Americans live with type 2 diabetes, and another 96 million are pre-diabetic. Cardiovascular disease remains the #1 killer worldwide. These are not random epidemics. They are the predictable outcomes of diets dominated by ultra-processed food. The pharmaceutical industry has profited immensely from this crisis. Medications for high blood pressure, cholesterol, and blood sugar became some of the most prescribed drugs in the world. Instead of asking why so many people needed lifelong medication, the system normalized it. A pill for every ill became the expectation. For the corporations involved, it was a dream scenario. Consumers would remain customers for life. And in some cases, the drive for profit went even further. The opioid epidemic revealed just how destructive unchecked marketing could be. In the 1990s, Purdue Pharma launched OxyContin, aggressively promoting it as a safe, non-addictive painkiller. Sales representatives were rewarded for pushing ever higher doses. Doctors were pressured to prescribe. Addiction rates soared, and over 500,000 Americans died from opioid overdoses between 1999 and 2019. Purdue eventually declared bankruptcy, but the damage was already done. The lesson was clear. When profits outweigh health, disaster follows. Food corporations used similar tactics. Soda companies fought aggressively against efforts to reduce sugar consumption. They spent millions lobbying against soda taxes and labeling requirements. They funded scientific research that shifted the blame for obesity away from diet and onto lack of exercise. In 2015, Coca-Cola was caught funding a group of scientists who promoted the idea that physical inactivity, not sugary drinks, was the primary cause of obesity. Public health organizations, desperate for funding, often accepted money from these same corporations, creating conflicts of interest that undermined trust in nutrition science. The result was a distorted public conversation about health. Consumers were told they could drink diet sodas and eat fortified cereals while popping supplements and taking medications to manage whatever conditions developed. Prevention was sidelined in favor of management, and because the system was profitable at every step, there was little incentive to change it. The U.S. now spends more than $4 trillion annually on healthcare, as nearly 20% of its entire economy. Yet life expectancy lags behind many other wealthy nations. People live longer with disease, not necessarily longer in good health. That is the hidden cost of the big food and big pharma cycle. It is not only measured in dollars, but in lives shaped by chronic illness, dependency, and the illusion of choice. We have traced the arc of a story that began in the post-war years, when convenience foods reshaped the American diet and pharmaceuticals promised a quick fix. We have seen how the sugar industry manipulated science in the 1960s, how diet culture rebranded processed foods in the 1980s, and how supplements and wellness products became the new frontier of profit in the 1990s and beyond. At every stage, big food and big pharma found ways to turn human health into a business model. The cycle is clear. Food creates the conditions for disease. Pharma manages the symptoms. Wellness sells the illusion of prevention. And the same corporations profit at every step. The result is a world where health is never the true goal, only the promise of health just out of reach, available for purchase in a box, a bottle, or a pill. But cycles can be broken. Real wellness does not come from a package. It comes from cooking real food, moving your body, getting enough rest, and building community. These are the unprofitable habits that prevent disease before it starts. They don't make headlines, they don't fuel billion-dollar markets, but they are the foundations of genuine health. The question is not whether the system is rigged. We can see that it is. The question is whether we continue to play the game on its terms or step outside it. We can demand better policies, support local food systems, and challenge the corporations that profit from our illness. Most importantly, we can reclaim wellness as something personal, not commercial. And if you've made it this far, thank you for watching. Most of the people who reach the end of our video still aren't subscribed, and that might even be you. So before you click away, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. It's the best way to make sure you don't miss the next investigation. And if you found this video valuable, give it a like. It helps more people discover this channel and join the conversation. Stay curious, stay critical, and remember, wellness begins with you, not with them.